just as we did with a whole number times a decimal, now we're going to look at how to read a model. Because as I told you the other day, the way that you're going to be tested on both your unit test and on STAR for this TEK is it's going to give you a model and you have to be able to give me the equation. So how do you do that? Well, as you built your other models, you should have seen that the factors come by looking at how many tenths columns shaded by how many rows of tenths that have been shaded. Those are my two factors giving me what overlaps the product. So we want to really look at that and break it down. And in doing that, we want to look, so the first identifier that we want to do is the first factor. And just like your first step of making a model, that first factor is going to be identify the columns. How many columns are shaded? So if you count, you see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns. So that's 7 tenths. Now, a lot of you see, because this is a hundredths grid, you want to write 7D. Just like with fractions, always wanting to use the lowest term, you want to do that with decimals. And a 0 behind the tenths place in a decimal is not necessary. So you really don't want to use it. You want to use the minimum number of digits that are required. So I'm not going to use a 0 behind my 7. I'm going to look at these in terms of tenths, just like our other examples were. So our second factor is determined over here by the rows. So the first factor, just like our step 1 in making, is counting the columns. The second one is determined by looking at the number of rows. And when I do, I see that I have 6 rows shaded, which those complete rows means 10 individual hundredths have been shaded 6 times in those rows, so that's 6 tenths. Okay, so to get the final product, or my answer, is I'm going to look at the darker shaded area because that's what's being overlapped here. And you can always tell what that is. Notice in these other models, it's not outlined in this nice black box. You can always draw it yourself by seeing the point of where the two connect. You know that it's outside this white box. And if I were to count each one of these individual boxes from 1 to the end, I would see that I have 6 rows by 7 columns. So I have an array of a 6 by 7. And when I counted all that up or multiplied 6 times 7, I would get 42. So the product for this problem is 42 hundredths. Not 42 tenths, not 42, but 42 hundredths. So I'm going to let you try the next one, and we want to go right here to this example. I don't want to do this one yet. I want to wait just a second. I want to walk you through this one. So I want you to try this example on your own. Identify step 1. Identify factor 2, step 2. And then determine step 3, the product. Okay. Hopefully what you determined by the first factor, counting these columns, is that your first factor was 3 tenths. Moving on, in the second factor, you should have identified 4 rows or 4 tenths. And in this overlapping section, I can see, even if I count by ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or I know that it is a 3 by 4 array, my product then is 12 hundredths. Okay? And then next I want you to go to example 3 right here. Again, we're going to save this one. And I want you to try this example on your own. Can you read this model? Okay. All right, let's check it. So in this example, I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns, 7 tenths. And I see that I only have one row right here left over, so I know that that's 9. So that's 9 tenths. So here that is an array of a 7 by 9, and I know 7 times 9 is 63, and that is 63 out of 100, or 63 hundredths. Okay, the last example is the one up here, because just like with whole numbers times a decimal, your decimal can have a whole number in it. And just with a decimal times a decimal, I can see if I've got two models here, that means that one of these factors has a whole number in it. So in this first one, you can see that all the way across has been shaded gray. So I know that this factor is equal to 1 and whatever comes up over here when I count out these columns. So over here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 additional columns shaded in. So this factor, this first factor, is 1 and 7 tenths. So he's going to be written in the first blank. Times, I can clearly see I've only got one row left. So this row, if I count all these rows up, that's going to be 9 tenths. So what is the answer? Well, in looking at this right here, this is an array of 10 times 9, or 90 hundredths, because this bottom row is not shaded, but everything else is. So if I counted all those blocks, I would count 90 out of 100 have been shaded this darker gray. Over here, it's a little hard to see the difference, but because I know that white starts right here, I know that it ends my array at that point. So this array is 9 times 7, which you just did down here in example 3. That's why I was saving it. And we found that that is equal to 63 hundredths. But you can't have two answers for a product. So what do you do with these two numbers? You have to combine them, add them together. With the one whole, you have 90 hundredths and addition, an additional 63 hundredths in the second model. So if you add 90 hundredths and 63 hundredths, you get right here 9 plus 6 we know is 15, and we've already learned how to add decimals. We carry that one over. We've made a whole now. So our answer is 1 and 53 hundredths. I can also see that right here, 90, I only need 10 more hundredths to make that whole. So if I take that 10 away, I'm left with 53. So I can also see there that I have one whole and 53 hundredths.